Hey guys, it's going to be my review for The Lighthouse. And what The Lighthouse is essentially about is we center on these two, lighthouse keepers, and basically they are staying in this remote cabin for like 3 to 4 weeks. There's this storm that's approaching, and basically because of the fact that they're the only two there, these two start to grow a lot more irritable of each other and really start to hallucinate, which eventually causes them to eventually go mad, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, The Lighthouse overall, I was very excited for this film. The second I heard that Robert Eggers had another horror film in development, I was pretty much on board. You guys know I adored his last film, The Lighthouse. I think that is one of the best horror films of the entire decade. Such a great little folk tale, but also just a really creepy and just eerie film that I just don't think enough people talk about, and such a specific style to it. And I was really excited to see what he was going to do here. I heard that this was going to be a very different kind of film. It had much more recognizable talent and things like that, but it was also a lot more smaller scale. So I was just very interested in seeing how this film would turn out. And guys, Robert Eggers has absolutely done again. In fact, The Lighthouse might just be his masterpiece. I think this is easily one of the best films of the entire year. That really is also one of the most suspenseful and just overall entertaining films, and we'll get into that, but we're just going to start off with the cast. And easily that is one of the best things about this film. The fact that this film doesn't have a lot going on acting-wise, I think is very impressive because we're only dealing with two actors here. The entire film is contingent upon how good their performances are, but I have to say, both Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson absolutely anchor this film. These two work so well together. Their back and forth is some of the best of the entire year. Maybe my favorite duo of the entire year. I just really adored these two so much. But talking about them individually, I mean, Robert Pattinson gives maybe the best performance of his entire career here. His character, Ephraim Winslow, is someone who he's very quiet, he's very reserved, and because of that, Pattinson has to emote without showing a lot of emotion, but as the film goes on, you see him start to grow more and more irritable of what's going on, and that's when Pattinson just absolutely kills it in this role. He has one scene, especially towards the end, it was so good, and you really do feel what he's going through. This is a man that really is starting to be on the brink of insanity, and you can really see how that's starting to hurt him and how it's starting to affect him both physically and mentally. And I just think Pattinson just did such an incredible job here, giving one of the best performances of the entire year, and I really love what he ended up doing here for sure. And then Willem Dafoe is the complete opposite. He is the loud, he is the very sort of flamboyant and just overall very demanding presence. Of his character of Thomas Wake is someone who is so larger than life. He's all high and mighty. He frequently is talking like a pirate. He's talking like he's almost like a caricature, but at no point does he actually feel the way, and it's mainly because of how good Dafoe is in this role. Dafoe plays him with a certain effort and just a certain charisma that I don't think another actor would be able to pull off. You really do see the kind of person that he is. You see how dedicated Wake is to what he's doing and how much he holds, the light to a standard and things like that. And just overall, I thought Dafoe did a great job. And again, this duo is easily one of my favorites of the year, and definitely just a fantastic acting showcase for the both of them, both giving powerhouse performances. And if the Academy has any good graces in them, which I don't think it's going to happen, but if they have any sense in them, both of these two should absolutely be nominated come award season because they both absolutely killed it here for sure. But now we have to get to the directing and the writing because there is a lot that I really do love about it for sure. And I do actually think Robert Eggers' directing is the best thing about this film, as good as Pattinson and Dafoe are, which, I mean, they truly are spectacular here. I really do think Eggers' directing is the thing that sticks out the most because when you watch something like The Witch, which is such a grueling and just dark and sinister film that just constantly is just getting under your skin, and you just feel so uncomfortable watching it, and it just becomes a harder and harder of a watch. to go from something like that to something like this, which at points is a buddy comedy, is very impressive. Now, look, yes, this is primarily a horror film. It definitely is very suspenseful. It's not necessarily scary, though. He's going for much more of a psychological type scare here and seeing what this can do to the psyche of these two men. And he does a very good job with that, but he also adds a bit of levity. There's a lot more comedy in this film than you're expecting. In fact, there's almost as much comedy as there is horror here, and they blend so seamlessly together. The comedy works so well not just because of the chemistry of the actors, but because of the tone here. I mean, it just feels so much more natural in that way, and because of that, the film never feels like it is alienating you in that way. It always feels like it's trying to keep you in the moment. It always does that as a way to like subvert your expectations. Like anytime you expect the film to get really serious, it suddenly is funny. Anytime you're expecting it to be funny, it suddenly is very serious. And the way that Eggers is able to do that seamlessly, I mean, that's very hard for most directors to pull off, especially a film like this that you wouldn't expect to be done that way. The way that he just pulls it off is fantastic. I think it really does show just how much of a mastercraft he is when it comes to directing, and I really love what he ended up doing here. The screenplay, though, here is easily one of my favorites of the year. In fact, it just might be my favorite screenplay of the entire year. I mean, this is a very simple story on the surface. It's two men who, they're both doing the same thing. One is a wiki in training. One is, in fact, someone who is very much he's much more dominant. He's very much a commander. He really is in a very powerful position. And they're now in this remote location. You can see how they're starting to get annoyed of each other. But that's really just judging it on a very surface level. There's way more to this film than that. What this film really is a character study of two very damaged men who are already broken, and just how them being in this environment breaks them even further. Especially when it comes to Pattinson's character, who I have to say is probably one of my favorite characters of the entire year. I absolutely adored the character of Ephraim Winslow. I mean, this is someone who, he really is directionless in life. There's a lot of things that you can tell he's just very lost by, but he's also very compelled to this position. He wants to do whatever he can to get as higher up as possible, and you can see how this is really starting to affect him. I mean, throughout the film, there are so many just grueling tasks that he has to deal with, and you really do feel bad for him because of that, but it also really starts to send him over the edge. Eventually, he just ends up breaking, and I thought this character was so well done in that way because he's someone who, again, he's trying to remain as composed as possible, and he's constantly distracted. There are so many sequences in this film where, like, he's clearly supposed to be focused on this one task, but his mind is just not there. He's just drifting off and thinking about something else, whether it's this mermaid that he's fascinated by, or other things that have happened in his past that I'm not going to get into because, heavy spoilers, but he is very rarely as focused as he should be. He is very distracted throughout this entire film, and it just makes for a really compelling character. And when you combine that with someone like Thomas Wake, who is the complete opposite, as I said, I mean, this guy is so abrasive, he's in your face, he's loud, he's obnoxious, he's constantly just always making noises. He even like is, farting constantly. I mean, this guy is just the worst. This is the kind of guy you don't want to be stuck with in this situation. This is the kind of guy that, you try to get as far away from as possible, but because of the fact that Winslow does really respect what he's doing, he has to try to remain composed. He has to try to do what he can to respect him. He knows that Wake is in a position he is because he worked hard for it, and he knows that Wake really cares about what he's doing, but he also is very fascinated by what's going on with Wake. He seems to be very obsessed with this light, the light that Wake constantly goes to, and he really wants to take hold of it, and it just makes for a really compelling narrative in the way, because eventually these two really do start to just despise each other, and eventually just doing whatever they can to get the other to crack, and it's just such a compelling narrative in that way. They do such a great job of just really getting you to understand them. So then once it is more of sort of a battle for dominance in that way, it's far more riveting. And I think they did a really great job of that. And like I said, a lot of the comedy does come from just how annoyed Winslow is at Wake. Something as little as just Wake's cooking and how much Winslow just despises it and how he longs for something much better to eat. Stuff, just little things like that really does build up just these two really starting to develop this seething hatred for each other and really wanting the other one to fail as much as possible. And that's what really makes for a riveting story. The film really does take its time in setting up this conflict, and because of that, it just makes the film so much more fulfilling in that way. But like I said, they also counterbalance that very well with the comedy here. There are many moments here that the film doesn't want you to take as seriously. Like I said, for example, Wake farts a lot, and it's actually really funny. Like, it's not just a fart joke to have a fart joke. It's funny because of the type of situation he's in. I mean, again, there's nothing that Wake hides. He's someone who is very direct. There's rarely anything. I mean, and in the trailer, when you hear him say, why'd you spill your beans? It's because Winslow's the exact opposite. Winslow doesn't like to reveal anything about his past, while Wake is the opposite. He's very out in the open about things, and you really do see that contrast very well, and that contrast really does play a really big part in the screenplay, but also just the psychological damage of what this does to these two men. I mean, they feel trapped throughout this entire movie with rarely anywhere else to go. They're constantly driven by these really haunting visions. There's things that both of them have done in their past that they don't want to admit, and eventually there are things that end up happening where they have to come out and confess what happened, and you see how this starts to change things. You see how this really starts to affect that partnership they have, where again, yes, the tension is always looming, but they're always trying to be respectful of each other. They're always trying to do what they can to stay as composed as possible, but after a certain point, there's only so much they can do there. And once those demons are revealed, it's hard to come back from that. So it's a very riveting film in that way, where you're just waiting to see these two push to their absolute breaking point and seeing what can happen from there. You're terrified when it's going to happen, but you're also really anticipating it. And it makes for one of the best screenplays of the entire year, without a doubt. But a lot of that suspense really does also come from the cinematography here, which this film has to give such a genius choice of, one, utilizing a 1.1 aspect ratio, but also being filmed entirely in black and white, giving it a really sort of classic feel. And it definitely does that. It definitely feels like a classic film at times, especially considering that there are whole scenes in this movie where there's barely any dialogue. It is very much at points a silent film in that way. Of course, there is a score, but which we'll get into, but it definitely does utilize that. But it also really enhances the tension here because of the fact that it is cut off in that aspect ratio. Certain details, like in the background and things like that, those are things characters just aren't seeing. And it really makes for a far more intimate sort of experience in that way. You really just zero in on their face and things like that. And I really love the way the cinematography captured that, but also just the little details. I mean, there's this great motif involving this wave because Willem Dafoe's character is so paranoid that this storm is incoming, and they use the waves as this motif to really again, build the tension in that way, and I really love the way that was done, and I honestly feel this film would not be as suspenseful if it wasn't in black and white. There are just certain things that you can do in black and white that you just can't capture in color, and I think this is a film that definitely needed to be styled in that way, and I definitely think it utilized it as well as it possibly could, and similar to Roma last year, like I said, I just can't see this film without it being black and white. I don't want to see a colorized version of this film because I think it just works as best as is, and I think they did a really genius choice in doing that. It's again, it really is very in the moment. It's very detailed. It's beautiful to look at throughout. I mean, there are some shots here that are just absolutely gorgeous looking, but also just horrifying to look at, and I really just adore the cinematography here. The score as well is easily one of my favorites of the entire year. It's very haunting, it's very eerie, but it's different from the score from The Witch, because even though, yes, it is the same composer, it's a lot more minimal, it's a lot more, again, it's not played nearly as much as it was in The Witch, but it definitely is one of my favorite scores of the year. And not just the score itself. I mean, there's some great just sound design in this movie. There's this running sound of this horrible horn that keeps going off every single time the lighthouse turns a certain direction. You can see how this is really affecting our characters and things like that. And I just really loved everything going on sound-wise in this movie. I think it was some of the best in the entire year. And the editing, similar to The Witch, this film is very slow-paced. And that might be a problem for some people, but for me, it absolutely wasn't. There wasn't a single second in this film that I was bored. I was pretty much laser-focused the entire time. I think they did a really great job at building the tension, and because it is so slow-moving, you're just waiting for it to get more chaotic. And once it does, it makes it that much more fulfilling. It makes it that much more frightening, and ends in a way that I truly was not expecting. And again, is going to be very perplexing for some people. But something I did really like about this film is that this is one of those films that, yes, is very weird, but my audience didn't come out actually annoyed by it. If anything, they were more, curious as to what they watched. I saw a lot of people, talking in circles and things like that, and that's great. That's what I want this film to do. This is the kind of the film that is going to provoke a discussion. This is the kind of film that is going to get people to, do all kinds of theories and analysis about it for years to come. That's definitely something this film is going to do, and I really do love that it is doing that kind of stuff. I love films that provoke this kind of discussion. This film really does weigh heavily on themes of competition, but also themes of isolation, themes of, nihilism, just themes of inferiority complex, toxic masculinity, all that kind of stuff this film dives very heavily into, but it also just is a really riveting and engrossing film that really did suck me in. But it also further solidifies Robert Eggers as a true horror mastermind. Similar to many horror directors this year, he has proven that he is not a one-trick pony. He definitely has a lot more talent in him than I think I even gave him credit for back when The Witch came out. I just cannot wait to see what he's going to do next. He's quickly becoming one of my favorites out there right now. From the absolutely stellar performances from its duo, to the gorgeous cinematography, to the really haunting score, to the just really riveting screenplay, everything about The Lighthouse is the kind of film that I really do love. It's easily one of my favorites of the entire year. It deserves all the praise it's gotten, and I really do hope starts to get more recognition come Oscar season. I know it's a very weird film. I know it definitely is very absurd, but it is one that I really hope gets a lot once we get there. But for all those reasons and many more, I am definitely going to give The Lighthouse overall an A+. Oh my god, it has been so long since I have seen a film this good in quite some time. But either way, guys, that's it for my review of The Lighthouse. Let me know what you guys saw this film overall, left your thoughts. And I know this film is definitely going to not be for everyone, but please check it out as soon as you possibly can. It is wide now, and definitely one that you need to seek out as soon as possible. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.